The clatter of forks against ceramic plates was a symphony of normalcy, a sound I'd come to associate with everything I wasn't experiencing. From my vantage point, perched at the small chipped formica table in the dimly lit corner of the kitchen, the scene unfolding in the dining room was a familiar tableau of communal warmth. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of shared conversation. It all drifted in, a constant reminder of the perimeter I was confined to. 99 nights. That's how long it had been since dinner had become a solitary affair for me. My mother called it a family diet. A euphemism so absurd it would have been laughable if it hadn't felt like a meticulously crafted punishment. My father, bless his oblivious soul, had even chimed in once, a cheerful nod towards my isolation. It's good for you, son. Builds character. And saves on portions. Saves on portions. That was the cruel irony. They were feasting while I was dieted. It started subtly. A new rule about saving leftovers for lunch, which somehow always meant my leftovers were the ones designated for single-serving consumption the next day, while theirs vanished into the collective fridge, a testament to a shared bounty that excluded me. Then came the shifting seating arrangements. My usual spot at the long dining table, a place I'd occupied for years, a place that had witnessed countless family celebrations and casual weeknight meals, became a placeholder for the overflow. A theoretical overflow that never materialized. A phantom guest whose absence was as palpable as any physical presence. Eventually it was just me with my single plate, pushed away from the heart of the family, into the functional utilitarian space where dishes were washed and homework was done, not where memories were made. My mother's pronouncements were delivered with an unshakable calm, a serene certainty that suggested this was not an imposition, but a benevolent decree. You know, darling, she'd say, her voice smooth as polished marble, as she'd deposit my plate onto my small table, the formica cool beneath the ceramic. We're all trying to be more mindful. This way you can really focus on your meal. No distractions. The distractions, of course, were the very essence of family. The shared glances, the interjected comments, the gentle teasing that wove through the tapestry of their conversations. I learned to listen, to piece together the evening's events from the snippets that escaped the dining room door. Like breadcrumbs from a feast I wasn't invited to. Who got the promotion? What Aunt Carol was wearing? A detail delivered with the flourish of maternal amusement. The latest neighborhood gossip. A hushed whisper that promised intrigue. I became an observer, a ghost at my own family's table, my presence acknowledged only by the occasional perfunctory, "How's your food?" tossed over the threshold. A question that felt more like a check-in on a distant relative than an inquiry into a shared experience. My father's participation in this charade was the most bewildering. He wasn't a cruel man, not by any stretch. He was just passive. He saw what was happening, I'm sure of it, the subtle yet deliberate segregation. But he'd adopted my mother's framing, perhaps to avoid conflict, perhaps because he genuinely believed it, or perhaps because it was easier than confronting the unsettling truth. It's our family's way of managing resources, he'd say, his tone so devoid of emotion that it sounded like he was reading from a spreadsheet, a financial report on familial consumption. Conserving. Being efficient. He'd nod, a slight, almost imperceptible movement of his head, as if confirming a proven theory. The nights blurred into a monotonous cycle of self-pity and silent resentment. I tried to read, my eyes scanning the words on the page, but the sounds of their conviviality, the crescendo of their shared joy, would pull me back, a siren song of belonging I couldn't reach. I tried to do homework, the quadratic equations blurring into meaningless symbols, but the gnawing feeling of being deliberately excluded, of being deemed unworthy of their immediate company, would consume my focus. My small table, perpetually set apart, became a symbol of my diminishing importance, a testament to a love that seemed to have been rerouted, reallocated, like a faulty wiring in a once bright house. I wasn't allowed to complain. Any hint of distress, any flicker of a tear in my eye, was met with a gentle reprimand, a soft but firm reminder of the family diet, and the need for discipline, a virtue I was apparently lacking. Don't be dramatic, dear. It's just dinner. Just dinner. It was more than just dinner. It was belonging. It was inclusion. It was being seen, truly seen, not as a dietary statistic or a resource to be managed, but as a son, a brother, a part of the whole. The turning point wasn't a dramatic revelation or a sudden burst of courage, no lie. Tnang strike of defiance. It was a slow accumulation of tiny indignities, like grains of sand building up to a dam, each one seemingly insignificant until the pressure became unbearable. It was the night my younger sister Maya, just 7, her voice full of the innocent confusion that children are privy to, pointed at my table and asked, "Why does Alex eat over there?" And my mother, without missing a beat, her voice as smooth and practiced as ever, replied, "Because Alex needs to practice eating independently like a big boy." Independent. I was 18. I was college-bound, with acceptance letters arriving with increasing frequency, each one a testament to my capabilities beyond the confines of our dinner table. I'd been practicing independent eating for nearly 2 decades, sharing countless meals at that very dining table, a table that had once been the undisputed center of our family's universe. The lie, so casual, so absolute, so easily delivered without a flicker of hesitation, was the spark. It wasn't just the lie itself, but the deliberate distortion of reality, the redefinition of my established place within the family narrative. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't rage, no shouting matches echoing through the halls. I didn't demand an explanation or seek an apology. I simply began to change my own habits, a quiet revolution that started with a single meal. The next evening, when my mother placed my plate on the kitchen table, the familiar weight of it a prelude to the usual ritual, I didn't sit down. I looked at the plate, then at my mother, her expression already settling into its practiced placidity. "I'm not hungry," I said, my voice quiet but firm, a new tone that surprised even myself with its steadiness. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, a minute crack in her serene facade. "But you haven't eaten anything all day," she countered, a hint of surprise, perhaps even a touch of manufactured concern in her tone. "I'll eat later," I replied, and with that, I walked out of the kitchen, the sound of my footsteps on the linoleum a small punctuation mark in the otherwise seamless flow of their evening. I headed for my room, the door closing behind me with a soft click. The dining room door was open a crack, and I could hear the usual cacophony, the familiar rhythm of their shared meal. I sat on my bed, the silence of my room a stark contrast, and found myself strangely calm, a quiet sense of agency settling over me. The next night the same thing. And the next. I would be home for dinner, present in the house, but I wouldn't join them. I'd claim to have already eaten, a quick snack I'd managed to procure before they even started cooking, or to have a sudden aversion to whatever was being served, a mild nausea that conveniently struck at dinner time, or simply that I wasn't feeling well enough to join them, a vague malaise that offered no room for further questioning. My parents, accustomed to my compliance, my unspoken acceptance of their pronouncements, were visibly unnerved. My mother's placid facade began to crack more noticeably, replaced by a subtle anxiety that manifested in the way she'd hover, a question forming on her lips before she'd swallow it back. My father's cheerful pronouncements about efficiency, about resource management, became more frequent, more strained, almost as if he were trying to convince himself as much as me. The question started tentative at first, then more direct. "Are you sure you're okay, son?" he'd ask, his gaze lingering for a moment before returning to the television screen. "Is something bothering you?" my mother would inquire, her hand reaching out to touch my arm before I'd subtly shift away. I'd just smile, a small tight smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, and say, "I'm fine, Mom. Just not hungry for that tonight." The real shift happened about a week into my silent boycott, a week of escalating quiet defiance. It was a Saturday, a night usually reserved for slightly more elaborate family meals, a time when the aroma of something special would fill the house, a beacon of shared culinary delight. I heard the familiar preparations, the clatter of dishes being set, the murmur of anticipation from the dining room. As they were all gathering in the dining room, their voices a low hum of gathering conviviality, I casually walked into the living room, where my father was engrossed in a sports game, the roar of the crowd a familiar backdrop. "Hey, Dad," I said, my tone casual, as if I were merely passing through. He looked up, a brief interruption to his absorption. "What's up?" he asked, his eyes already drifting back to the screen. "Just wondering if you guys needed any help setting the table," I offered, a slight smile playing on my lips, a silent question in my eyes. His brow furrowed, a fleeting moment of confusion. No, it's fine," he said, waving a dismissive hand, his gaze fixed on the game. "We've got it covered." My mother appeared in the doorway, her smile a little too bright, a little too forced. "Yes, dear, we're just finishing up." I didn't press it. I didn't push, didn't insist. I simply nodded and, with a final glance at the warm glow emanating from the dining room, walked out the front door. I went to a local diner, a place I'd always liked, its red vinyl booths and the scent of coffee and fried onions a comforting familiarity, but never frequented because, well, family dinners were the established order. I ordered a proper meal, a burger and fries, a greasy, satisfying indulgence, and savored every bite, the sound of casual conversation and the clinking of cutlery around me a comforting balm, a testament to a shared experience I was actively choosing. I stayed for a long time, lingering over my almost empty plate, until the diner was nearly empty, the waitress wiping down tables, preparing for the late-night rush. When I returned home, the house was quiet, a stillness that felt different from the usual quiet of a late evening. The dishes were cleared, the dining room table immaculate, save for the lingering scent of their meal, a faint ghost of their togetherness. I found my mother in the living room, scrolling on her phone, the blue light of the screen illuminating her face, my father asleep in his armchair, his head lolling slightly to one side, his breathing a soft rhythmic sound. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "You're back late," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any particular inflection. "I was out," I replied, still holding on to the quiet victory of my solitary meal, the satisfaction of having made a choice that was entirely my own. "With friends," I added, a small embellishment, a touch of color to the simple truth. She didn't question it, her gaze returning to her phone, a silent acknowledgement of my absence, a silent acknowledgement of my deliberate departure. The family diet continued for them, of course, a ritual they were still committed to. They still ate together, still shared their meals. But my absence was a gaping hole they couldn't ignore, a silence that resonated louder than any conversation. The laughter seemed a little forced, a little hollow. The conversations a little stilted, punctuated by awkward pauses where my input might have once been. They had effectively exiled me from their shared experience, from the fabric of their daily lives. And now, by choosing not to participate in my exile, by refusing to be the isolated outlier, I was making them confront the emptiness they had created, the void that my presence had once filled. It wasn't about punishing them, not about inflicting pain or seeking revenge. It was about reclaiming my space, my dignity, my inherent right to be included, to be a part of the family unit, not an outcast from it. The consequences weren't dramatic fireworks, no sudden upheaval or cathartic confrontation. They were subtle shifts in the atmosphere, like the gradual changing of seasons. One evening, a few weeks into my new routine, my mother called from the dining room, her voice softer than usual, a tentative tremor beneath its usual composure. "Alex? Are you coming to dinner tonight?" I paused before answering, the question hanging in the air between us. "What are you having?" I asked, my voice measured, calm. A moment of silence stretched, pregnant with unspoken possibilities. Then, "We're having lasagna." A pause longer this time, a hesitant beat. "There's plenty." I didn't go. I told her I had plans with friends, a familiar refrain now. But the invitation, tentative and hesitant, was a crack in the wall, a small fissure in the edifice of their imposed separation. My father stopped mentioning the family diet altogether, the euphemism dissolving into the unspoken, the uncomfortable reality of my absence. The focus shifted subtly from enforcing my isolation to a quiet, almost desperate attempt to coax me back into the fold, a silent plea disguised as normalcy. The elaborate meals continued, the shared laughter, the clinking of glasses, but the performance of my exclusion seemed to have lost its appeal for them. They were left with their communal feast, but the phantom limb of my missing presence was undeniable, a constant reminder of what was no longer whole. The emotional justice wasn't in their suffering, in their experiencing a similar deprivation, but in their dawning uncomfortable realization of what they had almost lost. My quiet decision to refuse their dictated solitude, to reclaim my right to belonging, had in its own way, starved them of something far more essential than a dinner plate, the simple, profound comfort of their son's presence at their table.